This is the Pro Wrestling Illustrated Podcast. I'm your host, PWI senior writer Al Castle, joined as always by my co-host Brian Solomon. How's it going?
Going really well, Al. Happy to be here as always.
I see we're celebrating a 6th birthday party behind you.
Yes, it is my 6th birthday this week.
Congratulations! I gotta say, you don't look so great for 6.
we had my son's birthday this week. Residual effect. His real birthday is this week, and the party. You know how it goes.
Yeah, and joining us also the boss, PWI editor Kevin McElvaney. How's it going?
I probably shouldn't claim the title of the boss. I mean, it's the now Mercedes or Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah. And we're all here because obviously I feel like we say this every week, but once again, a hugely newsworthy few days coming off of WrestleMania, maybe one of the biggest WrestleManias in history. Certainly all the metrics WWE is talking about shows that, but maybe not even the biggest story of the weekend with the news breaking of, I guess we're calling it a WWE sale, even though it's hard, not exactly clear if there was a transaction, but nevertheless, certainly a change in WWE as we know it, being acquired by Endeavor, which is the same company that owns UFC, and it's essentially a merger of WWE and UFC working separately, but under the same umbrella. Vince McMahon is very much back in charge. It sounds like he's going to be the executive chairman of this whole thing. And so we're going to be talking about all of it. And we will discuss WrestleMania somewhat separately, but obviously it's hard to separate the two because certainly now a lot of indications of maybe some of the reasons why we saw what we saw at WrestleMania had to do with some of these changes. And frankly, it changes some of my perspective on some of it. So, and I was there, I just got back from California yesterday, fantastic time at WrestleMania. So it's a little bit of an added perspective that we'll have. We'll get into all of it in a minute. Real quick, let's get the plugs out of the way. The latest issue of Pro Wrestling Illustrated. I've got the May issue with me. And you can get this on newsstands or ordered online. But now the June issue is available, at least a digital edition. The print edition, I guess it's a little more time before it's on newsstands, but should be on its way to people's mailboxes. Is that right, Kevin?
Correct. Yeah. If you're already a subscriber to PWI, you should be getting that any day now, honestly. They have shipped out. Currently on newsstands, we still have the issue that you showed with Mercedes Moné on the cover. And the next issue with the Impact Knockouts cover is on sale digitally now, or you can pre-order a copy from our website. That one hits newsstands Tuesday, April 18th. And let me put in a quick plug just while I'm on the topic of plugs. If you wanted to get that issue in digital format and then get future issues in digital format, a great way to do that is the new print and digital bundle that we're offering. So it's a great discount that we have. It would start with the current digital issue, and then the next issue you would get both digital and print. Huge savings for that. You get instant access via the PWI app. You can look on the web, on your phone, on your tablet. It's a really great setup. It took a while to get everything in place, but it's continuing to improve, and I think it's a pretty good experience. I mean, I'm a little biased, but it's a great deal.
That's a great way to go, because obviously there's always been, like, on one hand, you want it faster and you get it more quickly if you are a digital subscriber. On the other hand, obviously people love the magazine, holding in your hand, all that. Why not do both? Now you can. Head over to pwi-online.com. You talked about the cover. I guess we don't have it because we don't have the print issue yet, but it's a really great cover. A little bit of a throwback to what was it? The UWF cover is one of our more famous covers, where you got a lot of the UWF wrestlers grabbing for. Is it a trophy?
Yeah, it's the February 1987 PWI, which was the UWF PWI tournament for the $50,000 cash prize. It's an iconic cover from, really, I mean, the hot period of pro wrestling magazines. One of our most popular, best-selling issues to date, and pretty good response to it. This has the Impact Knockouts fighting over Mickie James Knockouts world title belt, which is really pretty appropriate because Mickie James at this point, unfortunately, has suffered an injury and may or may not be able to defend that belt anymore. But the cover story talks to her, talks to Gail Kim, a couple of other performers from the division, and looks at just how competitive it is. So it's a cool story, fun throwback cover. People are seeming to enjoy it. So yeah, I'm happy with how that one turned out.
Kevin, now we have to do a tribute cover now of the Michael Hayes, Kerry Von Erich, Jack Daniels, and Milk cover.
Oh, I love that cover. That's a classic.
Find two people for that. Unfortunately, Kurt Angle, he's over the hill now, but we got to find some. We do that one next.
Sure. Yeah. And I should add just real quick, Jason McVeigh wrote the cover story for that issue. It's fantastic. It's a labor of love. He knows more about Impact than anybody I know. I think even inside Impact, he's just followed it since the very beginning, weekly TNA pay-per-view eras. And yeah, he was the best possible person to write this story.
What else is in the issue? The June issue.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of stuff in the June issue. We have the Knockouts cover story, of course. We have your feature story, which is prescient. I mean, it's talking about Bray Wyatt and things he could learn from The Undertaker. And of course, Bray Wyatt has kind of vanished, and some confusion around what's happening with him creatively or at all in WWE. So we have that article. There's another great piece by Scott Fishman, which talks about the problem AEW has, where it's sort of turning into the NWO coming in on every segment, only it's a bunch of smaller NWOs, essentially like these groups of ruthless heels who will gang up on the baby faces, and who's going to stop it? So that's a cool story, and a few feature stories as well worth checking out on Shun Skywalker from Dragon Gate. He's the top champion there. Prodigy Billy Starks, who you've seen in AEW, MLW, other places. Lots of other stuff, columns. It's all good. Go pick it up.
Yep.
Nick Aldis interview.
What's that? Oh, Nick Aldis, right? That's the hot seat.
Hot seat.
Oh yeah. So it's like, I know we have a really good hot seat, and I need to plug it. And I was gonna do it after hours. But yeah, Brian spoke with Nick Aldis, and there's really it's a great conversation. I think people will be not entirely surprised, but like it's just some really thought-provoking ideas from Aldis there about just the way he sees the wrestling industry and how, kind of the tribalism of it. And there's room to appreciate all different styles. It's a really good read.
Yes. Well, check it all out. PWI-online.com. And again, you don't want to miss an issue. So go ahead and subscribe. Before we know it, we're going to be talking PWI 500 again in a couple months. So we're starting don't miss an issue. All right, let's get into it. As I mentioned, I got back from California yesterday, WrestleMania weekend. Loads of fun, loads of news coming out of it, WWE and otherwise. But then the big bombshell drops about the WWE sale, the merger with UFC under the Endeavor corporate banner. Vince McMahon very much back in charge as executive chairman, and not sure how to get into it. But why don't we start with the main event of WrestleMania? Kind of a shocker. I don't want to put it in the category of Brock versus Undertaker, but I think it's probably the next closest in terms of a jaw-dropping finish. Everybody, I think, assumed that this was it, and we talked about it. That Cody winning the title, he did not. He lost to Roman Reigns, and they seem to be kind of full steam ahead with Roman going forward. And last night we saw them sort of shift. Now Cody, I guess, a program with Brock Lesnar. What does it all mean? I very much was looking forward to, excited. Felt this was the time to put the title on Cody. When they didn't do it, I had kind of a mixed reaction, but I wasn't down on it. And something my kid told me, and I tweeted it out, was this is Infinity War, right? WWE's version of Marvel Infinity War, which is this is a piece of the story, not the full story. Kind of a downer, but it's a downer so you have an even bigger payoff down the line. And when I saw Cody get pinned, my first reaction was, they've got to overturn this. No way is this the finish. We need the dusty finish here, which would have been appropriate. But they didn't, and the show went off the air. And my thought was, well, now we know the main event of WrestleMania 40, and it is Cody versus Roman Reigns. And at this point, you can't even talk about The Rock or anything else. This has to be the main event. And I do think that in little ways, they planted some seeds about that being the main event. I know Cody did an interview on the Rich Eisen show last week promoting WrestleMania where they asked him like what your favorite building to work in is, and he talked about Philadelphia, which I thought was odd because I never really equated Cody with Philadelphia. But again, is he maybe sowing the seeds? Mania 40, big round number, birthplace of the nation, all that. It is risky. A lot has to go right between now and then to keep not even keep the momentum, because inevitably you're going to lose the momentum, to get back the momentum, to get back to they built a crescendo for WrestleMania, and obviously now they're moving on, and to get back up there and on a higher level is a huge risk to take. I mean, for one, it counts on everybody being healthy and Cody being over, and I know he'll be over somewhat, but will he be as over as he was this past week in California, where fans really, really wanted to see it? And so there's certainly a part of me that thinks I appreciate the long-term storytelling, and if there is a bigger picture here and a bigger plan, I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. But then we get word of Vince McMahon being back in charge, apparently not just at the helm, but very much involved with creative. Word is that he ran Raw last night, which is not a good thing. I don't think a lot of the reviews for Raw were particularly positive, and it did feel like a Vince McMahon Raw. And if the decision to beat Cody on Sunday was very much Vince McMahon's, it really makes me reconsider everything, because then it starts to feel more like Triple H and Sting years ago, where this wasn't about anything other than, no, Roman is our guy, Cody is not, and we're moving on. And that thing that all you fans really want, no, we're not doing that. We're doing Roman and let's get Brock back into the mix, and kind of like a familiar formula. And that makes me terrified and really bummed out. It would just be one of the most unsatisfying things if they never go all the way with Cody. And one more, if they do go all the way with Cody at any other stage but WrestleMania. Brian, we talked about last week, and that there was a perfect analogy that you brought up, Lex Luger at SummerSlam, and how they missed it. They missed that window where the time was right, and they never got it back. And when Cody was in the ring last night talking about, let's do the rematch tonight, let's do the rematch and the money back, I'm just thinking, no. I mean, it can't be anything other than WrestleMania 40, or it will be incredibly unsatisfying. And under Triple H's vision, I had the faith and the trust that they knew what they were doing. If this is Vince, I don't have that faith at all. Right?
Yeah, I think that, well, I mean, I have so many thoughts on this, but clearly this was the wrong move. And I don't care how many bizarre gaslighting WWE fans come at me on Twitter. This was the wrong move. This was a very, very big blunder. And I think as time moves forward, the perspective on that, I think, is going to make it clear. Now, I want to give them the benefit of the doubt and all that, like some of the things you alluded to, Al, and what other people have, that, just wait, this is part of the story and that kind of thing. No, that was the moment. That night was the moment. To get back to a moment like that is going to be next to impossible. And now my feeling is that that's not even their interest, to try to get back to a moment like that. That's when you do it. I mean, all this kind of like everybody all of a sudden turns into like Bill Watts with all these like booking theories of how it works. It's like, that's where you do it. What is the point of saying, oh, we're going to screw you at WrestleMania, but wait till we get to Fully Loaded? That's going to be the big one. Like, no, that's where you do it. And anything after that is going to be an anticlimax. Am I going to say he's never going to get it? No. I mean, there's a good chance that he will get it. It's not going to mean anything like what it did, and it'll probably be kind of a short thing. I do think that, look, the story, it's one thing to tell a story that has parts to it and all this, and you can't just beat the guy, but everybody's like, well, you can't just beat the guy right out of the gate. This is a man who's held the title for 2.5 years. I mean, no one's held the title this long, since like Ronald Reagan was president. So, I mean, this isn't like it wouldn't be any like lack of patience to put the title on Cody, who they've been building for a year. I just think that, yes, this feels like the classic kind of pettiness of WWE, almost like, and I hate to almost sound like a conspiracy theorist, but almost to the point of, because we know that when Cody was brought back, Vince was still firmly in charge at that time. It almost feels like this is what Vince wanted to do all along. And I think that maybe it's not what Triple H wanted to do, possibly. But now that Vince is back, it's like they're going back to what the original plan was, which was to just eventually squash him and kind of minimize him. I mean, this is the guy. Think about what he did to his dad. I mean, you don't need to be, that much of a conspiracy person to imagine. I mean, they took his dad, who was one of the biggest stars of his era, and made him into, or tried their best to make him into a joke. He got over better than they ever thought he would. It's the other thing we have to take into account here is, we've talked about it, Al. Cody's one of those guys that you always feel like if they don't handle him right, he's on the verge of having fans turn, because he's like this pure baby face. You have to be very careful with a character like that in this day and age. It's one thing to be like a badass, like an Austin or whatever, or like a, like that kind of character, or a Rock. You have to handle him with care. And doing these things, he comes across, this is not how I feel about him personally or as a talent. I think he's phenomenal. The way he's being booked, he comes across as weak and as a loser. And the way WrestleMania ended, the way he was treated, I even think the visual of putting him with Brock makes him look like he doesn't belong there. Brock is this monster alpha male, and they have Cody in like a purple suit standing next to Brock, who, even though Cody's not a small man, but he looks like a small man. And I think these are all kind of like carefully calculated things to make him look weak and that he doesn't belong there. And whether that's their intention or not, that's going to be what happens. And I want to be proven wrong, but I just sense that fans will turn on him, so that by the time you do decide to do this or pull the trigger or whatever, they've already turned on him. And then you can justify it by saying like, well, this isn't what the fans want, so we're not going to go that route. So it just smacks of all this, the Endeavor sale, Vince taking over again. I'll just
his evil new mustache,
right? His snidely whiplash kind of thing that he has going on. I do think that this was a change. I believe that the original plan was for Cody to go over here. In fact, I think if he hadn't gotten hurt, I think we talked about this last time, I think they might have done a screw job finish at SummerSlam like they did here, and then build towards Cody winning it at Mania. I think that might have been possibly in the cards. But I do think this was a last-minute change, and I think it had a lot to do with Vince being back.
Yeah, that's what makes me worried, trying, again, to give the benefit of the doubt, not to Vince McMahon, because he doesn't deserve it, but Triple H, I think, very much does. I do think, again, sort of devil's advocate, Cody has only been back on TV a few months. Yes, the fans were geared up, ready for him to get that spot. But we've also talked about that on some weeks, the timing didn't feel like quite right, like he didn't peak at the right time. This is all to say, could you make fans want it more? Could you build Cody even bigger? The reality is, even since he arrived a year ago, Cody hasn't worked with very many people, right? I mean, the first part of his run that was cut short, all he did was work with Seth Rollins on 3 pay-per-views, all the house shows. It was the same match. Seth, great matches, but it was like one program, and then gone all that time, comes back, wins the Royal Rumble, straight to Roman Reigns. So can you make an argument that you build on, that snowball keeps on rolling down the hill, and you have him take out a Brock Lesnar and he gets hotter and hotter and bigger? Sure. Do I think that that's what's happening? I don't know. It's not clear. I wish we knew outright whether this was the plan all along, or as you suggested, which, it very much has that feel, this was a change made by Vince McMahon. And to me, when I was in the building and I was, seeing Cody come to the ring and everybody singing along with the music, and there was just such a feeling of like this groundswell and people just waiting for it. And then he stops by and he grabs his daughter, and, the little girl reaches out for their dad. It was such a moment, right? It's like, there's no way they can beat this guy, and they did, and they did sort of. I mean, you had the Solo Sikoa shot, but it wasn't even very controversial. I mean, it was right in the middle.
And I know it might be reading too much into things, but like I'm one of these people that sometimes how they say you could tell when people come out for a match. Sometimes you could tell what's on their mind, like what's going to happen in the match. And this.
Did you see something from Cody?
Yes, I did, and I didn't quite know what it was. Now, look, I was expecting him to be very emotional, especially if and when he won, that it would be this emotional moment. But there was a level of emotion that when he came out, and it was even before he was there with his family, that it read to me almost like disappointment, like a very serious amount of disappointment. Like, I can't believe I have to go through with this. Now, again, that could be me completely projecting, but he was very emotional coming out. I mean, he almost looked like he was about to cry. And I'm talking about like just as he was coming down the ramp. And it might have been just overwhelmed with the moment and the crowd. And I understand that. But in hindsight, I'm going like, is he thinking like, holy crap, I can't believe after all this, I have to walk out and do this, like almost like second guessing everything. And I had people going, oh, this is the chase. The money's in the chase. You got to chase the title. But you have to give people something or they're going to give up. Like we talked last time we did this. This was the moment for Roman. He's been great. He is great. But it can't just keep going on and on and on. That's not a story. That's just, you have to give the fans something so that they keep hoping. People were like, well, look at how Dusty Rhodes booked Ric Flair and he was unstoppable and the faces were always chasing him. Yes, Ric Flair lost the title 6 times in 7 years.
Yeah.
And, he would lose it to a face, get it back really quickly. But it would give the fans hope, like, oh, maybe this guy will be the next one. You have to give them hope. I love long title reigns, but you have to know when it's time to end it.
I agree. I want to get to Kevin in a second, but I guess what I'm trying to do, maybe it's just sort of being optimistic, is thinking, is there a way that this could work? And there is, right? I mean, there is a way where you build it. Cody gets hotter. WrestleMania 40 is a bigger stage theoretically than WrestleMania 39. Roman gets hotter. You get to the 1,000 days. He beats the Pedro Morales record or his reign. The legend of Roman Reigns is even bigger. He keeps on going on his streak, even more sort of like unbeatable, insurmountable. And then you've got all the circumstances that made WrestleMania 39 feel so special, even more special at WrestleMania 40, because now Cody's got to climb all the way back from this valley, and it becomes that much more inspirational. Again, is there a universe where that could be the plan and they do it? Yes. Do I think that's what's going to happen? I don't know. Even if that is the plan, it's so much between now and then that have to go right. And now back in the hands of somebody who we know from one show to the other completely changes his mind, rewrites scripts minutes before
and
showtime.
Apparently did it last night. He did.
Yeah, I just don't believe that he's going to hold out, that he has the patience to do that, or the focus, the attention to do it. And the added element that I think you touched on, which is very much the case, is this is Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon is petty, and this is a Rhodes. And Cody, started AEW and went up against them. And there's the whole family, the history, as you touched on with Cody. Vince McMahon spent 30 plus years just crapping on the Rhodes for sport, right? I mean, at every corner trying to humiliate him and his family. After Dusty died, they still had him in this goofy Stardust character, which I think everybody knew wasn't benefiting anybody, but it was just about sending a message. It was just about putting your thumb on Cody and the Rhodes family. And what kind of like the ultimate sort of insult here would be this: you build him up to WrestleMania and you beat him, and that's it. Now Cody, you go work with Brock Lesnar near the top of the card, and we'll find something else for Roman Reigns. If that's what it is, it's terrible, disheartening, discouraging. I mean, it's the kind of thing that all the goodwill that WWE has built up, really since Triple H has been in power, they are really jeopardizing it with everything we've seen. Kevin, weigh in here.
Okay, so there's so much to cover there, and I won't attempt to cover most of it. But similarly, I was completely shocked by the finish. I was certain that Cody was going to win the match, win the title at WrestleMania. I mean, it seemed, I don't know. I thought WrestleMania 39, Cody winning, outside, I think even in a scenario where The Rock came back, I think they would have found a way to get the title on Cody before then. Maybe that wasn't the plan. I do think, at least at first, they were trying to make a good faith effort to make Cody look good. I mean, he beat Seth 3 matches in a row at pay-per-view. That's a huge deal. I know Seth loses a lot, and we've talked about that on this podcast a few times, but it was really a show of faith in him to let him come in, have his gimmick, have his music, his same nickname, same attire, and then come in and beat one of their top stars 3 pay-per-views in a row. I think likely the company appreciated what he did at Hell in a Cell, even though in hindsight, maybe not the best idea, but it was a show of fortitude on his part. And I think, Vince McMahon being relatively out of the picture when the Royal Rumble came, I wouldn't have been shocked if Cody won the Royal Rumble anyway. I think a certain amount of this was already going to be in motion. The build, at least under Triple H, felt like it was designed to deliver a Cody victory at WrestleMania, right down to Roman kind of refusing to put him over in promos and stuff like that. That doesn't do anybody any good. He's just kind of like, oh, your dad never really talked about you. And Michael Cole saying on commentary, this is just another day at the office for Roman Reigns, but he should be careful. And, he didn't really give him anything until the match. And that, that feels like in most cases sort of a swerve to set up like, well, he's going to learn real fast. But in reality, he didn't, because it was kind of a standard Roman Reigns match finish.
Yes.
How much of it's Vince, how much is Triple H? It's hard to say, but a lot of stuff has happened very quickly with Vince. And I mean, I'm sure we're going to talk about this in conjunction with the sale later, but a lot of that was just doesn't give me a lot of confidence in the company's creative direction going forward. So I do think there are ways to salvage this. I think there are possibly even plans they already have in place, but what I've learned is that a lot of times these plans are abandoned for almost no reason at all. So I think this has a lot of implications for, the quality of the show going forward, for the job security of some of the performers. It also, if I'm someone like an MJF, who, may already have ostensibly agreed to stay with AEW, but, or Kenny Omega or the Young Bucks, these people that WWE is supposed to be courting in the months ahead. I look at what's been happening lately and what happened with Cody at WrestleMania in like the most no-brainer scenario. You need a babyface, even if it's not like a white meat babyface with Cody. You need a babyface, a good guy, a hero that people will actually root for. They passed over Sami Zayn for that, and I think a lot of people understood like, hey, look, that would have been a great moment for the fans if Sami had won the title there, but they have another plan with Cody Rhodes, and they're sticking to that. And that wasn't what happened either. So it's kind of like, you don't want to give anybody, like Brian said, any hope. I mean, anything to hang their hat on. And I mean, that's at a certain point, that's not delayed gratification. That's antagonizing your audience, which is why you saw, before everything happened with Vince last year, the ratings were in the toilet. Like there was just no denying. Like the shows were, SmackDown was doing well in spite of Vince, I think in some cases, because the bloodline was catching on. Or beginning to, and then Raw was, well, we know Raw was what it was last night. You had a 3-hour show with 1 hour commercial free, and it was something like less than 30 minutes total match time, and then an advertised main event, which is a huge main event, and they just flat out don't give it to you in any way. I mean, maybe one time that happened under Triple H was that cage match with Becky Lynch and Bayley. A lot of people were rightly kind of, pissed off about that. I was upset too. I tuned in specifically for that match. But the explanation given there is that, they kind of ran short on time, and fair enough. They delivered it, a few weeks later, and it was a big match, and they gave it time. That to me is not Vince McMahon's booking strategy. It's not logical necessarily, or giving fans what they want. It's like kind of, he's said on camera in character numerous times over the years, frankly, I know what you want better than what you do. you know, it's meant to be antagonizing on camera, but he friggin' believes that. Everything he's done over the years has, in his, you know, how he's conducted himself as a professional, how he's presented the product. I don't know. This is kind of a bleak situation for Cody, and it's, you know, it's hard not to feel bad for the guy, because he walked away from something he built, and, you know, they could still do right by him, but he walked away from something he built and had a real stake in, had, you know, his kids there in terms of like how he referred to his proteges and students, and he left all of that, and, you know, he certainly had reasons to leave, and there were some of them we'll never even know about, but he did that, and it was a risk to go back to WWE, where he had not been treated well. And then, well, I mean, they could still make good on him, but kind of like Brian says, that was the best opportunity to do it. And I think he's going to lose momentum now that he's beaten, and he's been humiliated by Brock, and he's been shown to be, he's going to look corny, for lack of a better word.
That's it. Yeah. I mean, he's, like I said, as much as I love him, and I'm completely on board with the character, I also know I'm not the target demo of the show, and I haven't been for a long time. And for a lot of fans, like, they need convincing to believe that Cody Rhodes is a cool guy that they should root for. They need convincing of that. And, you know, like the Brock thing is going to be a real test. Even if I'll give him the benefit of the doubt and say, yes, they're building towards this thing, and, you know, Brock is something to keep him busy, right? He's got to win then. He's got to win convincingly, because that's the point. Because if, like, he beats somebody like Brock, and not only beats him, but like convincingly, strongly, okay, then I'll say, oh, maybe, you know, I'm not saying it's how I would have done it, but maybe. If he loses to Brock, then we know the jig is up. I mean, that's cards on the table. If he loses to Brock, there's no point in that. You know, it's forgetting the idea that, look, not to get preachy, but wrestling is supposed to be catharsis. I mean, the idea is enjoyment, and to give fans a good feeling, and that comes from the good guys winning. I'm not saying the good guys always win, but they usually win in the end of whatever. And so even when you've got a
which
heel,
is what WrestleMania traditionally is.
Right. That's it.
Even when you have a heel that's running roughshod and beating everybody, the idea is you're doing that so that it feels really good when he loses. If he never loses and he keeps going and going, what is it? That's not the way booking's done.
Again, you know, all these things get addressed if they, you know, climax at next year's WrestleMania. That's a big risk, and it's putting a lot of faith in somebody who frankly doesn't deserve it. And that's one of the frustrating things too, is that, you know, you touched on it, Kevin. It's like throughout the last year, there were all these other opportunities, and we defended the direction WWE was going in. You know, there are people calling to put it on Drew at Clash of the Castle, and that felt right. You know, right? They're in Wales, and it's this packed stadium, and that, you know, Drew's got all this goodwill. And they didn't do it, and you think, okay, there's a bigger plan. And then Sammy in Montreal, and, you know, the groundswell support for him, that felt right. They didn't do it, and again, you give them the benefit of the doubt, like, all right, they're building to something, But then you don't do that thing, and now again, the only way I think to salvage it is next year's WrestleMania. And between now and then, not only do they have a year's worth of shows, but they have, especially under this new model with Endeavor, and we're going to see even more, you know, they kind of want everything to be WrestleMania, right? So Money in the Bank is going to, I think, be in a stadium, right? And SummerSlam is going to be in Ford Field in Detroit, you know, which we last saw them at WrestleMania 23. So along the way, they're going to need those big matches, and the temptation is going to be, yeah, all right, let's put the belt on Cody here in, you know, Money in the Bank or something like that. And it will be, I'm sure they'll have a great match when it happens, and it'll be a great moment, but it's not going to be the same. They missed it. Unless, again, they get all the way to next year. And if that's the case, you know, forget about what you do with Cody over the next year, because that's almost a little easier to figure out. It's a Brock Lesnar, and, you know, you could go back to Seth. You could set up these opponents where he's building, and he can fall along the way. He could lose some matches, and you just kind of get him back into the Royal Rumble, and he wins, and you're on your way. But what do you do with Roman for the next year? That is compelling. That is believable. I mean, he's cleaned out the division. You can, you know, there's matches that haven't been done, whether it's Bobby Lashley, or you could go back to a Braun Strowman or something like that. But
I think if
how do
Randy
you
Orton comes back, that'll be his
right,
big,
Randy haven't done. I mean, there are matches, but how do you keep it really interesting? And that's the other thing is we've talked about Roman is so great. There's absolutely part of me that's like, all right, let's keep it going. You know, Roman's incredible, but also even that, you know, the Usos lost now, right? So the bloodline's a little bit weakened. It's like I don't know that there's a year's worth of material here with Roman and the bloodline, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's like, look, there's such a thing as too much of a good thing. I appreciate the patience in the booking. I mean, I was telling somebody this. You look around, and you've got the longest reigning, you know, like Bianca Belair, Raw Women's Champion for a year. The Usos, longest reigning tag champs ever. Gunther, longest reigning IC champ since the Honky Tonk Man. Plus the Roman Reigns thing. I like that. I like the patience and like playing things out and not hot-shotting. I think it's great. But again, you have to know when. This thing of, you know, people are going, well, he's going for a record or he's going to pass 1,000 days. I'm the biggest wrestling statistics nerd there is, but I don't think that translates to business at all. I do not think that a legitimate reason to keep a belt on somebody is so they hit a record. And unless it has some really serious storyline implications, I think that's very foolish. If that was factoring into their thinking of like, well, we can't have Cody win it because Roman is almost close to beating Pedro Morales. Like, I just
don't think that's a thing. I do think the 1,000 days is a thing. I think they want to get there,
and Triple H actually mentioned it last night, which makes me think that it is a thing. I still think that's no reason to keep it going.
But I don't know what it is. It's a ceremony with those balloons behind you on SmackDown, you know, and an angle, you know, that's it. Beyond that, I don't know what the significance is.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit more about the sale and what it means, how WWE is going to change for the better or for the worse. You know, they had Triple H open the show yesterday to kind of reassure fans, you know, don't worry, nothing is changing here. It's the speech like that we've all had at a job at some point when like a new company buys it, right? Like everybody's job is safe. There's nothing to worry about. And then the heads start rolling. So I don't, you know, I certainly get it, right? I mean, like in terms of other companies that are similar to WWE, you know, UFC is as close as they come, and that's not by accident. I mean, they were inspired by WWE. They've said that. Dana White always, you know, raves about Vince McMahon sort of being his hero. So, you know, the synergies, all that, it makes sense. You know, the questions are, what does this mean for fans and what does this mean for the talent? And in both cases, I don't know. I think they're set up to make a lot more money, right? So if you work for WWE, especially if you're like an executive there, I get it. You're gonna make a whole lot more money, you know. And we've already seen with Nick Khan them take advantage of these opportunities, you know, little things, but like having a cinnamon raisin crunch guy running around the ring. That was all over WrestleMania, and it's fine. It's like, great, you know, find your new revenue streams wherever you can find them, as long as you're not sort of sacrificing a lot from the product. But this does make me worry because, you know, in as much as, you know, they're going to go with best practices, that kind of thing. There are a lot of things about the UFC model that I'm not a big fan of, and I worry about. You know, not the least of which is fleecing your customers. You know. Now, where
you don't like paying $80 per month for a pay-per-view?
Plus your ESPN Plus subscription. I don't know what it is, but yeah, you've got to pay for your ESPN Plus subscription which is something $5 a month, and for the right for the opportunity to then go and buy and I think it's up to $80 or something.
And yet, the UFC talent is kind of, there's a lot of, especially in MMA circles, talks about they're not at the very highest level. They're all paid very well, but the understanding is WWE, even at a lower level, maybe outside of developmental, you know, just being on the roster pays pretty well. UFC doesn't necessarily. Like, you're out there making
unless you're a top guy, and even them, I mean, like a John Jones or something doesn't make what you know. I don't want to say a mid-level boxing attraction, but you know, a Tyson Fury who's a big boxing attraction. It's not even comparable, right? No. I mean, you know, if you're a top UFC guy, you hope to break into those 7 figures for a fight, and I think it's relatively rare. And if you're underneath, you're not making very much. at all. And the other thing is ticket prices, right? I mean, they were selling tickets at WrestleMania for all the crap we give WWE. I think they've done a decent job over the years of keeping ticket prices somewhat reasonable. And even for WrestleMania, you could get in for a reasonable amount of money. You know, UFC comes around here to New York every once in a while, and where they're in the Garden, forget it. I mean, like, you can't get in the building for less than $300 for the cheap seats, and they sell them all. And now you're going to have a bug in Vince McMahon's ear. You know, why are you charging so little for tickets? These people will pay so much more, and forget about.
Other people will pay it though, Alan. I think, like, I mean, you can attest to this. Taking your kids to these events, you don't have as much of that at UFC.
But that might be it. It might be changing what the demo is and the target is, and you aim more for the high roller. I don't know in pro wrestling how much of that is realistic in terms of just like there's a certain, I don't know. I don't think you're gonna pack Madison Square Garden with a bunch of millionaires for a WWE show. But this is all to say, this all looks like an opportunity to make a lot more money for a relatively small number of people who work very high up in Endeavor and WWE. This is about I would think about very rich people getting richer. And
it's like everything else.
Yeah, and not necessarily anything good for the fans. So, Kevin, you've got to work with these people a lot in your position. What are your expectations about how things change?
So I think it'll depend on what happens internally in terms of people being let go and things like that. I mean, I can even speak to, Adam Hawkins, who worked there for years, was incredibly responsive, great to work with, easy to approach. And like the current setup is professional and it's been fine. And we ultimately still get like what we need to get from them, like in terms of, access and things like that. But it is a lot less personal. And I don't expect that to really change unless they have some rock star is going to do it for the whole company. But like the combined WWE UFC, but I think just there's some concern. I mean, there was a lot of talk even about like our awards issue where talent were taking pictures with their plaques and such. And, that not happening under Vince wasn't necessarily like Vince says no to this. It wasn't, but we put in requests and sometimes requests are accepted, sometimes they're not. I do think that willingness to like, yeah, we'll have our talent on the cover with plaques along with other talent. Again, we won't say anything about it. I don't know how much that flies under Vince, but I mean, like, it's what we're going to try for, because this is, we're covering the entire industry, the entire sport, whatever you're going to call it. And we'll continue to, work with them professionally. And so far it's been fine. I'm a little distrustful of Vince McMahon's MO here, because honestly, I mean, the whole thing, and I was just talking about this earlier online, like, it's performative, and there are these allegations against him. And like, obviously a lot of these have not been adjudicated in court. There've been NDAs. We only know so much about it legally, but how many stories do you have over the years about Vince McMahon just not doing right by his talent one way or another?
Yeah.
Whether or not any sexual assault allegations, sexual misconduct allegations are true, again, they can be tried in court, but, there have been, these aren't like completely made up on the fly things. These are allegations that have people who've so-and-so told me about this, or this has been corroborated. And that doesn't mean he's guilty, but there was this investigation and he ended up having to pay for the investigation. And then he ended up paying, for other costs that were deemed like these should have been company expenses and such, and trying to keep everything above board. And then he rides it out, and then he comes back, and, it's bit by bit, just like kind of death by 1,000 cuts thing.
Yeah.
Where he starts and he's okay. Well, I'm really just coming back to facilitate a sale, which, let's say we talked about this in the magazine, but it was even that was a little bit like, like how do you have the inside on a sale all of a sudden? Like, who are you talking to? Which I don't know that there's anything illegal about that, but there's really no denying that he kind of forced his way back into the position, because the board flat out voted against him returning. And then there he is. And then some of the board resigns and some of the board is gone. And then he's back in his position of power. And it's like, okay, yeah, he's doing this, but he's just there to facilitate a sale. Okay, well, he's executive chairman, and he can do what he wants. Like, oh, he's not in creative. Okay, he's talking to Paul Levesque, but he's not really in charge of anything. Okay, yeah, maybe the storyline was his, but Paul Levesque doesn't have to do anything. And then you have reports that he's backstage, script rewrites last minute, same old crap.
Yep.
So it just seems so hollow. Like he stepped away and did everything that he legally had to do, so that he wouldn't get in trouble and so that everything he wanted could take place, from a legal and I guess fiduciary standpoint. Like the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed. I'm not saying anything illegal happened, because it didn't. They were very above board in taking all the steps that they had to take. But let's look at the facts. Vince McMahon he paid back the money for the cost of the investigation. It was something like $19 million that was paid back recently. This was reported a couple of weeks ago.
That sounds very familiar. Somebody paying off somebody for silence.
Well, okay, that's another.
But you know what? I bring that up for a reason, not to delve into politics, but there is all an association about the kind of people that we are talking about, right? And that includes Dana White, who was just caught on camera a couple of weeks ago smacking his wife in the face. And paid zero consequences. There were no kind of disciplinary actions against him. Never suspended.
Power slap was delayed a week, and then he wasn't on the first episode or something.
And again, I'm not going to name names, but you think about the players involved. There's a connection with all of them, and I don't mean in terms of conspiracy theory, but I mean in terms of this is the kind of people that we're talking about now at the helm, and what these people are about. And these people are for whatever they say. I mean, and they might even believe it, that they're about fan service and that kind of thing. At the end of the day, they are about, I think, power and money. And I'm not naive. I get that everybody's trying to make money and climb up, and including somebody like Paul Levesque. But I think in Paul Levesque, and we saw it firsthand for the last several months, is I do think that you saw there somebody who really did want to do what was best for fans and best for the product, while also, addressing his responsibilities as an executive and to grow the company and make money. And I just worry that there's not going to be that voice as much anymore, looking out for the fans.
And there is also the concern that, obviously it's undeniable that the product improved from a TV standpoint, and that, there was every report suggested that the atmosphere was better backstage. You had people brought back, people wanting to go back who had, had happily departed before. And then it is worth noting that Vince's role was downplayed, so there's probably some responsibility there on the terms of the company. I mean, they weren't publicly pushing back against anything. And I understand he's your boss, technically being the chairman of the board. He wields a lot of power, but it's just all of it stinks to me. And I can't. It's hard for me to reconcile all this, especially what I was saying before with the $19 million repayment, which again, it's SEC filing. It wasn't like some discrete thing that was dug up. This was reported and admitted to, because it was supposed to be like, hey, you cost the company this much money with this investigation and you need to repay it. But then within weeks of that, he gets a new contract with a salary, with room for stock bonuses, with all this other stuff. It just does not send a good message, especially to, women working within the company, that there was someone who, that's why, let's not forget, that's why he stepped away. And again, allegations unproven in court. I understand that. But if I'm a woman working in WWE, and then I saw him step aside and the company kind of, elevate Stephanie and do all these things that seem to be a step in the right direction after these allegations, and then all of it sort of effectively just gets undone because Vince decides he wants to be back. Come on.
And this really does seem to be it's like payback. This is like they tried to push him out of his company.
Right.
And this was his response, very much, I think. And we know he's trash talked his own family in the past, and in his eyes, their incompetence and their inability to follow in his footsteps. And that's what this was. It was his way of coming back and saying, you can't take my company from me. I am now going to force my way in and chart the destiny of this company in a way that you don't want it to go. And I'm not saying that it never would have been sold, because we were talking about that for a while, that the sale eventually was inevitable. I don't think it was going to be happening immediately, though. I think you were going to see like Stephanie and Triple H and Nick Khan putting their mark on it, establishing it, and Vince saying, you know what? No, you're going to push me out. You're going to vote against me. This company is going to be what I want it to be, and we're selling, and you're out. And I think that that's what this was. And you look, again, we all have our personal biases. I'm put off personally by the fact that, Vince bought this thing. It's not like his dad gave it to him. That needs to be said. He didn't inherit it. It wasn't handed to him. He had to pay for it, $1.5 million, but he had to pay for it. And so, but there's something to be said here for somebody that would just choose to, to screw over their own family and just go for power and as much money as you can. And look, I'm not saying we're going to see like Stephanie McMahon on the side of the road panhandling anytime soon. But to put your family out in the cold like that, instead of saying, I'm going to take care of my family. And again, this is my own personal bias. This is a family business. I'm going to look out for my family. I'm going to make sure that they're taken care of. Take care of your own children better than you took care of classy Freddie Blassie. That would probably be nice,
Again, the overlaps with other items in the news, it's just incredible. I mean, so much of what you're saying, I think, applies to other people, and I don't think it's coincidence. I mean, again, I think this is what we're talking about. This is the kind of people that we're talking about, and there are relatively few of them, thankfully, but all in positions of great power. All right, why don't we talk a little bit about the rest of WrestleMania? Mostly fun stuff. I mean, a really good show, right? I mean, over both days, I had a blast. I thought lots of high points, relatively few low points. One of them involved Shane McMahon. And his return. That was a disaster, but a lot to like. They went with the main event that we hoped for, night one, with Kevin and Sami winning the titles. And again, in terms of essentially the opposite of what we got with Cody and Roman, this was built up and they delivered, and it was feel good, and it was just kind of this release. And I think it was everything you wanted it to be. Do you agree, Brian?
I do, and it was a great way to end the first night. I know that there was that question of whether they should put Ripley and Flair on last, and I'll even go so far as to say that self-contained, just as a match, I think that they stole the night.
It was a better
Rhea
match.
Ripley and Charlotte Flair was the best bell-to-bell match of night one and possibly even of the whole show, but it still should not have gone on last. I think they made the right choice. You don't have to put the best match on last. Otherwise, Steamboat and Savage would have closed out WrestleMania 3, right? They didn't. So, I mean, they made the right choice to have that feel-good ending, to pay off. Like Hunter said in the press conference, he was right. It's the story that warrants that last match and that main event, that feel-good story, the one that people are the most invested in of anything. And they really did it in spades there with just the little things. Again, it's like, this is what I'm going to miss if Vince is back. But like all the little things of like it coming down to Sami and Jay in those final moments, and the look on his face, and pausing for a moment, that look of just like, this is it right here. This is what it came down to. It didn't have to be this way, but this is the way it is. It was just picture perfect, cinematic, not as a cinematic match, but a cinematic moment. It was just beautiful. I think it was delivered so well. That was like the apex of WWE night one.
And go ahead.
And Sami and Kevin came out, and they'd referenced Pro Wrestling Guerrilla directly and indirectly on air a couple times. They essentially had modified Pro Wrestling Guerrilla logos.
They did
PWG logos on their tights. So
that was all great.
I don't know that that's something Vince signs off on.
Right. That was all great, and good. If there's a downside, I don't know downside, but kind of a come down, and we saw it last night. Whereas for all that build up, now they're the tag team champions. Now they move on, and we got a reminder last night about what it means to be tag team champions, and it means like you're in the mid card with Street Profits, having a good match that doesn't mean a whole lot, and that is sort of the come down. Is now you're in the tag team division, and historically, that's not the greatest place to be in WWE. And really, as long as you're in that tag team division, short of just doing like the super matches, Brock and a partner or all these big stars, are we that excited about them working with the Alpha Academy or the Viking Raiders or what have you? It's just they showed how they are WrestleMania headliners as an act, and they're so much bigger than the rest of the division that's one of the things that they have to kind of figure out now.
I have a thought on that, and it's an opportunity that I don't know if they'll take, but by the very notion that you have now two main eventers that are holding the World Tag Team title, and they even made the Tag Team title the main event of the first night, which never been done at WrestleMania, Tag Team title match main event. Excuse me. You have the opportunity to make the Tag Team title matches when you want them to be into main events. And you can do it as a way to give Roman a rest if they're stuck with Roman now for a while. You can't do this with any old team. Like if Street Profits or Viking Raiders are the tag team champs, you can't do this. But with those two guys, you can say, oh, wow, these two other main eventers now are going to take a shot at Zayn and Owens, and it's going to be for the World Tag Team title. And we could make that a main event. You know what I mean? You can't do that with any old team. I'm not saying they're going to do that. Last night wasn't an indication of that, but they could potentially do it as a way, like I said, to not have Roman also in every main event. I think that would be a great thing to do.
Yeah. Again, sort of like how we began this conversation, that's all well and good, and I'd have some faith in that being a possible under Triple H. Under Vince McMahon, we know what Vince McMahon thinks about tag team wrestling and how he presents it. And again, not a lot of reason for optimism. So it was the build to get the title on Sami and Kevin. And now I feel like, barring again, sort of like a complete a changing of what the tag team division means. I sort of feel like they can't hold on to those belts for too long, for their own good. If Sami wants to be back in that main event picture, or Kevin wants to be back in the main event picture, they cannot be pigeonholed as members of the tag team division. So we'll see. What else in terms of big matches? The Mysterios. Maybe it's an opportunity to talk about the weekend for Rey Mysterio. I thought he was great. I thought this match was fantastic. Again, delivered 100%. I think Dominic has got to be in discussion for most hated wrestler of the year. He's such a hateable, great heel, so good at everything that he does. I love the entrance with the paddy wagon, just hilarious. At the Hall of Fame, him walking out. I went to the Fan Superstar, which is essentially like what Access is now. And there was this big mural there that was, for people to take pictures in front of the whole WrestleMania logo and all the people. And it was spray painted. And I was like, what, jerk did this? And then you realize it's spray painted over Rhea and over Rey, and it was Dominic and Charlotte. And there was also some stuff of theirs in like the Hall of Fame display, and that stuff was defaced. So I just loved it. You could have put Dominic over. This felt like the right finish. Everything perfect. I loved the involvement with the family. I love the LWO. I think that's fantastic. And taking it back a day, the Hall of Fame, I thought that was great too. I thought Conan was great. I thought Rey's just immensely likable. The stories about his love story with his wife and her like dropping out of med school to support him when he was training to be a wrestler and sleeping under the ring. It was just so authentic and sweet, and just kind of like, again, something that's made you feel good. Yeah,
that was really nice. And I was at Cauliflower Alley Club last fall, and Conan got the Lucha Libre award, and Rey Mysterio got, I forget which one, but a major award. And so they spoke a little bit about each other at that event, and you could just they said some of the same things, and you can tell the love they have for each other, and that Rey owes everything to Conan in a very real way, and he knows it, and it came across so beautifully. But yeah, the match could have. The beauty of it was it could have really gone either way. I think there were justifications for either guy winning, and it still would have been great. I think that Dominic, I was skeptical. I've always been skeptical of him when he first started. I was skeptical of him when he turned heel. I think it's great, and I think the father-son, this storyline is probably the second best thing they've got going outside of the bloodline, which is great because you don't want it to just be just a one story show. I think it's very cool. I'm wondering what happens with Rhea. I almost feel like she's starting to outgrow it a little bit.
I agree.
Like she should move on, and definitely I don't think she should do the Judgment Day anymore.
Yeah, I don't know that we even need to see the Judgment Day. I feel like everybody's kind of like moved on now. We see Damian Priest mixing it up with Bad Bunny, and we saw Bad Bunny involved in this match. And I think it's fine. The guy's a huge star. If he's up for doing something with them, I think they're smart to take him up on it, especially with the pay-per-view coming to Puerto Rico. Do you think, Kevin, that there's still some mileage left in Ray and Dominic? I think there's, I was telling my wife and kids yesterday that the one place that they haven't gone to yet, and maybe they don't ever go there, is Dominic smacking his mother, something like that. I mean, that's where like they gone right up to the line with him telling her to shut up. But sort of, if you really want to take it to the next level, does he physically attack his mother, something like that, which would be so unthinkable, and that would give this even more heat.
I don't really want to see him as that ruthless heel. I think if he does something to that effect, I'd stay away from it. But if he did, I would almost like have his mom like not sell it and hit him back. because what happened at WrestleMania with he got spanked and he got slapped by his mom on camera. It's fantastic. It's the spoiled brat character. It's perfect. It is over the top in such a great way. He has the prison teardrop tattoo from his 12 hours in jail. It is so good. And Ray is a perfect counterpart to it because he resisted fighting him for so long. And then he's like, all right, listen to me, you little S, and and just, like you don't disrespect your mother and your sister. And, and then, I do think there's mileage left, especially because Ray beat him. I don't think you have to have Dominic go over Ray really strong at any point. They probably will if they continue this, but honestly, like, I think he's really good in this role right now. And I think Rhea, with the reaction she's getting, can easily just kind of realize like, hey, this guy's a loser, and she can separate from him and be a good baby face. But I don't think their story's over yet either. And I think that's part of what makes this so entertaining.
Yeah. Right. I was thinking that would be a big part. Like once he loses, that she would then have the attitude of like, you're a loser. I don't want to be with you anymore now, to Dominic. I also think we need to at some point ask the question of, what is it with Rhea Ripley and Buddy Matthews and the Mysterio children? What's going on there? We have Buddy is in love with Ray's daughter. Rhea's in love with Ray's son.
It's funny because there was this screenshot of Dominic at the Hall of Fame with Rhea next to him, and then Rhea's real life boyfriend Buddy Matthews next to her. Yes. And then somebody tweeted like, "This is just hilarious to see this." And then Buddy Matthews quote tweeted it and said, "Believe it or not, Aaliyah's on the other side of me." And of course, Buddy and Aaliyah had the storyline connection a while back, where they were going to have a romance there.
Yeah, it's all a lot of fun. Again, the kind of, not to be a downer, but the kind of thing like you hope sticks around. Such good WWE storytelling. Just in terms of touching on this, I think a really cool moment for Latino representation in WWE, that match that you had Ray and Dominic on such a high profile, his family at ringside, the LWO and the pop that the LWO got when they got those shirts Friday night, huge, superstar Bad Bunny at ringside getting involved. It was just, it's cool. It was, I think, classy. It was all just perfectly executed, and the crowd loved it. Everybody ate it up. So that was a lot of fun.
And I'm very excited for the fact that WWE is returning to Puerto Rico. And I know that there's been some talk about, their subsidies they're receiving for that. Honestly, for all we've talked about the Saudi Arabia shows being controversial for that reason, I think it's great for Puerto Rico because it's it's just been through so much over the last, decade between natural disasters and so many other things. And it has such a rich history of pro wrestling and like some of the most passionate fans in the world. So to see WWE go back there and then have, Bad Bunny hosting the show and, potentially have Ray and Dominic as you said, Latino representation and a major part of that show, I think that's a really cool thing. So some stuff to look forward to there, I think.
Yeah. In terms of some other highlights from WrestleMania, the Intercontinental title match, I think everything that we hoped it would be. Drew
So good.
Just beating the crap out of each other, and a really fun match to watch live. Again, my kids sort of like on the periphery of being fans now, don't even know like these players that well. But how do this is just like the most sort of like reflexive sort of thing as a person is just watching a fight, right? And they were into it because these guys were just smashing each other, and it was a blast. I think a lot of people are pulling for Sheamus to get that IC belt that didn't get it, but nobody's complaining. Gunther looks good, and he's primed now. I think the one thing with that, it's one of those situations where retaining the title might be a bad thing. I mean, similar to what we were just saying with Kevin and Sammy is. He might have outgrown the IC title already, and if he lost it, I think, all right, good. Now he's primed to move into a bigger spot. As long as he's got that title, but he's got plenty of time too. And this is also the match was fantastic.
And without knowing what the main event was going to turn out to be, it really did seem to me and probably a lot of people that he would have been the logical lined up challenger for Cody. Especially based on the Royal Rumble thing. He's definitely a better match for Cody than for Roman, I think. And I think it was the right move, not necessarily that he kept the belt, but the right move that he didn't get pinned or defeated. Right. Like what I was kind of imagining was they would do a thing where, he'd lose it, but he'd lose it because Sheamus or McIntyre pinned each other. And then that would add fuel to his fire of why he didn't want to be in a triple threat in the first place. But then he still looks like a monster because he never really lost. Like that would have been another way to go to, but I'm glad that he came out looking strong. Like people always say, wrestling is so many different things, and it's great to have so many different types of matches and things. And that's the kind of thing, the kind of match that I really enjoy seeing. I'm one of these people. Johnny Valentine, Wahoo McDaniel, Harley Race. Like I could watch stuff like that all day of people just, demolishing each other in that very realistic way, but in the back of your head, they're okay because it's wrestling. Like that's what I love about wrestling. Like I can't watch a UFC fight, but I could watch that all day long, and I loved it. It was awesome. Like that's my favorite kind of wrestling. Yeah,
a lot of fun.
Very good.
What else on the show? Edge and Finn Balor was fine. I think the crowd was into it. I mean, I think the story coming out of it was the nasty cut that Finn got, which was.
I was pretty upset about the interruption at that time when I thought it was just he got a little gash.
That's like the tricky thing about PG WWE.
Without knowing how bad it was in the moment.
Yeah, no, they absolutely did the right thing in stopping it. But when I didn't realize the severity of it, I was like, come on, like you're ruining the flow of this match. It's Hell in a Cell.
Yeah, and the whole idea of Hell in a Cell.
Okay, I get it.
And if anything, a little blood would have helped too, honestly, but not a cut like that.
Side, you can't mess
but it is one of these things that WWE runs into every once in a while that really kind of tears down that fourth wall, which I guess is one of the things you were talking about promoting as a good thing. But it's like you've got this match which is it's like sort of the ultimate gimmick when you really hate this guy and you want to tear him apart. And he's like, he cut himself. Oh, okay, I'll wait. I'll stand back here while you
let the doctors in, open the door. Right. Yeah.
I want to kill you, but you got a cut on your head. So let me stand over here. The other thing, we touched on it before. This wasn't a big deal, but worth talking about Shane McMahon's return and almost immediate sort of incapacitation.
That stretch of the show was cursed. It was back to back.
Yeah. And and look, I get a kick out of The Miz. I think he serves a role. But on both nights, the worst segments, I think it's fair to say, involved The Miz. Night one, Pat McAfee. We were talking about, who do you put in that spot? Does the Undertaker come out and tombstone him? Does Steve Austin come out and give him a stunner? It was McAfee, and it's like, meh, they won't even pay for the white stripes anymore. So it was like the not even like the fun McAfee, and it just felt. It just wasn't very good, and then obviously even worse on the next night with Shane coming back. What does that mean? I mean, that's also, is that something? Is it on the same week that Vince is back in charge? We see Shane back on TV. Is Shane back?
That family's had a lot of drama over the years, a lot of reconciliations. Shane's left and come back before.
Yeah,
certainly a nasty injury, and I think we're not gonna have time to get into Supercard of Honor here. But worth noting, Dante Martin had this a gnarly leg injury, really nasty during, a very dangerous spot, a Canadian destroyer, off the ladder through multiple tables, and people were rightfully concerned, do you really need to do it, something like that? But the reality is Shane McMahon, who, he's an older guy, but he's in good shape and everything, takes care of himself, does practices jujitsu, I think, did a leapfrog, and it happened. He tore his quad. I'm not saying that you shouldn't consider the risk of something you're doing, because of course you should, but it just shows how fragile our bodies are and how easily you can get hurt doing anything in wrestling.
Yeah, the column that I did about a while back about what happened to Hangman Adam Page was all about how sometimes the worst injuries in wrestling really happen in the moves that don't look that serious or bad or crazy. That's the reality. That's pulling back the curtain. Sometimes the moves that are more elaborate and look more dangerous are the ones that they're the most careful with, and it's the simple, Bruno Sammartino breaks his neck on a body slam, things like that. That's what happens. Look, Shane is in shape, but Shane is 53 years old. No offense. I mean, I love the guy. He signed my checks for a while, but he is the age now that Vince was when he was feuding with Austin in the Austin McMahon thing. And I don't think he's Vince. That's the thing.
Well, he only tore one quad.
Yes,
right. That's true. I've been vocal for a long time that I don't think Shane should come in and look like a threat to wrestlers, because he's not.
Yeah, maybe that's one of the upsides. Maybe they're finally kind of getting that realization that this guy cannot be.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame that's what it had to come to. I don't want to see anybody
absolutely
hurt just trying to go out there and entertain.
Yeah.
But
I felt very bad for him in that.
Sure.
It's just it's embarrassing. It's got to be
a pro. I got to give it to. I mean, Snoop came through in the moment. I think a lot of people were saying, how smart he was, and that they pulled off that audible. To me, clearly that was a spot that was planned in the match, probably all along. But
probably after
they shifted. Yeah, because you saw Miz immediately position himself for the people's elbow. So clearly that there was a plan for that. But I think they covered up nicely. I think Snoop, I said it when he was inducted a few years ago. He's got something. I mean, he gave one of the best Hall of Fame speeches, and he just seems to sort of get it on the right level, and a fan, and that goes a long way. As for the wrestler card, we'd have to go through everything else, but up and down, I think it over-delivered. Brock and Omos was a lot of fun. Even those the multi-tag team matches were both pretty good, especially the men's one. The crowd was going crazy for that match.
The men's one was a lot better than I thought. It was very good.
Yeah. Asuka and Bianca was fine. I think the highlight was Bianca's entrance, and you hear the story about the little girl whose mother died, just heartbreaking. But I think Bianca's great, and they need to keep going there. And I think that's it. That was the big stuff. But people are talking about it as one of the great WrestleManias, and I agree. And I think WWE now has a little bit of a streak going of I think 4 years into it, they're sort of figuring out that formula. I think 2 nights helps, because both nights go about 4 hours, and right when you're sort of starting to get exhausted, they're kind of going to the finish versus a couple of years ago, you'd be exhausted and there'd still be half the show left to go. So this works a lot better. You touched on some of this stuff, and there is so much that goes on over the weekend, and we won't get to all of it. But NXT new champion in Carmelo Hayes.
He's great.
I think the guy's got some star power. I think it's probably the right move. I assume Braun maybe gets to come up. So that's all great. Braun was not the only Steiner making news over the weekend. Unfortunately, a terrible story about his father, Rick Steiner, at WrestleCon, seemingly unprovoked, just kind of unloading on Giselle Shaw, the
current PWI cover star, Giselle Shaw, who's interviewed inside the magazine. Certainly,
that I think was the real alarming thing was that by all indication it was. Not that there's any provocation for that, but he just started kind of going off on her.
It was 100% unprovoked and offensive and horrible. And I mean, I'll die on the hill. If anybody who'd watching this, reading the magazine, thinks it was in any way appropriate what he did, look, we don't need your money. Just like that. That was like I don't like stances like that, because we need everybody's money. But
that was discouraging. Yeah, and that was a discouraging thing is seeing any defenders of him. And it's like, look, whatever you think here, This is
Very
just
few in the
somebody-
wrestling community too. People, and
Yeah.
wrestlers and promoters and everybody were universally like, "What is wrong with you?"
I hope so, because again, whatever you think, it's like this is just some guy just attacking another human being out of the blue,
Right.
unprovoked, that didn't do anything. Just awful, and I haven't seen video. I don't know if there is video. I don't know if Rick Steiner has a different side to what happened, but certainly Giselle's version and some people who I saw post, they witnessed it. It sounds like it pretty much what Giselle said, in which case it's disgraceful. And I think that's going to change the way a lot of people look at a guy who was part of a pretty beloved tag team. And I would think for a guy like him, something like WrestleCon is a big revenue generator each year, and I can't imagine him being welcome at these kind of
So
things
disappointing. Yeah.
Who would have thought that Scott Steiner would be the more
Right?
level-headed of the Steiners? Like when
I know.
insane to me.
Well, who knows? I mean, he just yeah.
Well, Cornette had a great line about it, actually. He said, when I first heard that, my initial response was, are you sure they got the right Steiner? Because, I mean, it's nothing against Scott, but
Yeah.
I'm not saying that he holds those thoughts at all. I'm not.
But he has
I'm
more
just
of a
saying,
reputation
of
flying
the
off
two,
Yeah.
I would be the least surprised if it was him.
And there's absolutely the component of it whatever you think, whatever backwards thinking you have. Your son is in the wrestling business and he's trying to climb up. Like, what a terrible thing to do, because now your son has got to carry this with him, right? I mean, now like there's not a way that this doesn't somehow rub off. Not that it should, right? I mean, like I don't put any of this on Braun, not knowing what he thinks about any of it. But it's just you're putting baggage on your kid that he doesn't need.
That's what gets me about it too. It's like the idea that you would think that you could just do something like that, just the audacity of it, and that there'd be no repercussions. And like you said, my son has having maybe the biggest match of his career tomorrow, and now this is what everyone's going to be talking about instead of my son. Look, I am under no illusions that all of a sudden everybody is going to hold hands and sing Kumbaya, and there are people in the world that have awful, terrible, hateful opinions and thoughts. And the best we could hope is that one day, and it happens sometimes, that they can change, that they could learn, that they could get better, because they're not just going to vanish and disappear from the earth. So that's the best thing we could hope for.
Yep.
It's quite another thing when you can't keep it to yourself and you're out there and harassing somebody who's just trying to live their lives for no reason.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing. Those two things are completely different. Like, you get these morons who are just like, well, everybody's entitled to an opinion. He's just, yes, great, awesome. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. You're not entitled to be screaming it at somebody and harassing them
even
when they're trying to live their lives,
Right. I mean, put it aside. I mean, imagine if somebody, whatever. I mean, would you start screaming about somebody's appearance at something?
Right.
It's just
Well, it's identity.
no
It's not
defending
just
it.
appearance. Like this is
right.
this
Yeah.
is who
Yeah.
he
I mean,
is.
this is
Like,
who the
that's-
person is. And no, I agree. But it's just to say that, like, there is no justification, and it's crazy to see people defending him, and clearly he thinks he's so much in the right that, like, he was fine, right? Like, I mean, he
and
in his mind, he
He did it twice. That's the thing. He yelled at her the first time, and she was kind of like, "Man, that was uncomfortable. I hope I don't run into that person again." And then later, she was like, "You know what? Let me take a walk and see if we can figure out who did this." And he did it again.
Yeah.
Right.
No, right. I mean, he was unashamed of it, apparently. Has he said anything? I don't think.
No, I honestly, I mean, like, he's not gonna be like, you know what, I've thought about it. Like, I really doubt it. That would be amazing if somebody went and talked to him. And
well, that is, and maybe it happens. I mean, like, there certainly are situations where that kind of thing has happened, where somebody has a certain
which is great
point of view, and they get enlightened. And sometimes it takes something like this for you to consider perspectives that you wouldn't have considered otherwise. I don't know. I think it's wishful thinking. And anything else coming out of the weekend you guys wanted to touch on?
Bushwhacker Butch.
Yeah, absolutely. That happened. I guess the news broke Monday, right, of his passing. Yeah,
he actually came out there, because Luke is always everywhere. He does a lot.
Was he there over the weekend? I wasn't even aware of that.
He was.
Oh, really?
And Butch has been sick for years, and so he usually stays in New Zealand. Like, I remember, I've run into Luke a few times, and I'll say, like, "Hey, where's Butch?" And it's always like, "Well, he's home. He doesn't really come out much. He's sick." he came out for this. It was the first time he came out in years to do like Bushwhacker signings together, which they hadn't done in the longest time. And I mean, it was a medical issue. It was something related to his medication. I think what somebody described it as was, he just was not up to the travel in his health and in his old age, that the travel got to him. And yeah, I believe he was actually taken out of one of the appearances and taken directly to the ICU. And he was there for like a couple of days, and he didn't make it. And I mean, look, I know the Bushwhackers were as silly as comedic as it can be. They were also one of the most over acts in the WWF for years. Yeah. Kids absolutely adored them, and they were a big part of that product for a long time. And I mean, they reinvented themselves. They were like one of the most bloodthirsty tag teams of all time. And then they turned into one of the most family friendly, beloved kids tag teams of all time.
And actually, Brian, we were that at the International Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
During the panel, Luke was talking about like how, of course, spoke finally at Butch, but was talking about how that was such a great thing for them because they had to bleed and hurt themselves for so long to make money, and then they were just able to go out and do funny dances and lick people. And
they were like middle aged by that point. So it's I mean, they spent half their careers before that even happened for them. So I mean, that was a really cool thing. A lot of people loved them. Like I've told the story before, and it's like, even Vince McMahon had a very high opinion of them. I remember when they were doing, because he knew how over they were, when they were starting the Legends program, I was in the room when they were like pitching who was going to be in it. And he blew a gasket because he was seeing like JR was involved, and like some of the other, like they were putting people from, Memphis and Florida and Mid-Atlantic, people that Vince just had no connection to. And he's looking and he's going, well, these people don't belong here. And one of the first words out of his mouth was, where are the Bushwhackers? Really, where? And I know there's a lot of fans whose heads would explode hearing that. But I mean, they were a very valued part of the product, for not because they were in the main event or they were tag team champions, but you're presenting a family-friendly product. And look, as they say, they put a lot of smiles on a lot of people's faces. And I think that's a very, very valuable role that they both played.
Yeah, absolutely. Our condolences to his family.
I think it would be remiss to say also, a less serious note, but there was a lot of good wrestling over the weekend that happened. Obviously, like both nights of WrestleMania, very good, especially night one. But there's Supercard of Honor. There was a wide ranging of things from the Collective and GCW. That stuff's all on Fight TV Plus, which actually you can get. There's a cheap subscription you can get now. You don't have to like buy all those individually. So you had Effie's Big Gay Brunch for the Culture event. You had a great Lucha show after WrestleMania Saturday. And then, you had things taking place at WrestleCon as well. You had the Impact New Japan hybrid show. You had TJPW, Tokyo Joshi Pro, doing its first show stateside. DDT ran a show on Fight TV. A lot of cool stuff out there to go and check out. If there are, we talk about most of these people in the magazine. So if there's a name you don't recognize and you want to go look into them and see their work, this is a lot of people were out there this weekend doing pretty cool stuff. So
yeah, it was sort of the first WrestleMania where it was kind of fully back from COVID, because even into 2022, there were still some remnants we were just getting, over Omicron. This really felt like kind of back to business, and it's great. And again, always kind of a come down afterwards, because WWE talks about they always have their season premiere in September, whatever that means, and it's meaningless. But this does feel like kind of the reset, and the Raw after WrestleMania is always supposed to kind of be the biggest Raw of the year. But again, there's sort of a come down because now you're done, and now we're starting all over again, building to next year's WrestleMania.
And I hope to see you both there in Philadelphia.
I will be there. Yes. Yeah. I think I'm staying at your house.
Not the entire staff can stay at my house.
I had the poor planning to decide that my son was going to be born the week of WrestleMania. So we have to, I will definitely be there in some capacity, but it's highly unlikely, as Gorilla would say, that I'll be there the entire weekend. Unfortunately,
we should definitely talk about doing something. I mean,
We'll do that off air. We'll have something out.
Let's hash this out right now, right here. All right, guys, a lot of fun. Appreciate all you guys doing this with me. And again, head over to pwi-online.com for this latest issue. We'll have our WrestleMania coverage in a future issue. And that's it for now. We will see you again soon.